Welcome to the Standard of Truth podcast. In this podcast, Dr. Garrett Dirkmont and Professor Richard Leduc explore the early history of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and the life and teachings of Prophet Joseph Smith. They examine the original historical sources and provide context for events of the past. They approach the history of the Church with faith, expertise, and humor.
Hi, welcome to another episode of the Standard of Truth podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Garrett Dirkmont, and I am joined by my friend, Professor Richard Leduc, who's hemming and hawing right now at the line on the Oklahoma State Cowboys BYU game.
I think Oklahoma State's going to cover. I think that they will. It's going to be a cold. It's going to be a rainy game. It's going to slow things down. BYU is averaging 17 turnovers per game that they're getting. It's really helping things along. But I think BYU comes out ahead. But
is it supposed to be rainy?
65% chance of rain for the day. I think the low is 37.
But
though
Oklahoma State being a passing team, wouldn't that hurt them more?
They have the 122nd ranked offense. I don't think they're a running team or a passing team.
So you don't think the rain is the deciding factor?
I feel very confident that the rain will help them out because they cannot move the ball.
Okay. Well, you have made so you're saying they're going to cover. So they're going to lose, but by less than 9.
Yeah, good teams win, great teams cover. Go Pokes. But BYU, I will come out victorious. I'll be wearing a BYU jersey that my son gave me for my birthday, which was very nice of him. But then I'll be wearing, obviously, a cowboy hat as a kind of a tip of the cap, and I'm on my way.
Do you think that maybe people will not think that you are showing your Oklahoma State loyalty because you are getting your PhD at Oklahoma State, but instead think that maybe you're from, like, Vernal?
I was going to say Payson.
But yeah, I mean, maybe, yeah, they're like, oh, look, here's someone from Hooper.
That's probably more accurate. Yeah,
they're not going to think that Oklahoma State Cowboys fans traveled here.
No, my gosh, no.
They're not going to think anyone gets their PhD there because even you don't get your PhD there. You just try to get your PhD there.
I'm so doggone close. I've had my measurement into my committee for approval for the past 2 weeks, and they've been slow rolling this thing out. Is it because it's terrible? Of course, but still, feedback would be helpful.
Have you thought about the fact that maybe they're waiting to see how the game goes before they give you feedback, and it might be like much more terse if it's a blowout win for BYU?
It might be. It's possible.
They're just waiting. They want to get retaliation. And
look, first of all, how many people in your dissertation committee were super football fans?
One of them.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah,
my chair.
Also my chair. Apparently, being a sports fan makes you a chair.
So he's a big Oklahoma State guy. He got his undergrad there. Went and got his PhD at Madison. One of the drunkest counties in all of the United
So he went
States.
to the University of Wisconsin.
He did, yeah.
Oh, wow, yeah.
So anyway, he's a big football fan. No one else on my committee, I think, even knows what football is.
Wow. Okay.
They're career academics. They're,
Let me tell you about my dissertation chair. He was a huge sports fan, especially baseball, but he liked football too. And so he would occasionally invite all of the graduate students to go with him down to a Colorado Rockies game. So you'd go from Boulder down to the Colorado Rockies, which is very kind.
Yeah, stadium's fun. It's a fun stadium.
Yeah.
Fun ballpark.
It was very interesting that every time we went, he would deliberately assign me to go purchase all of the beers for everyone who wanted one, and then to carry them back up to the seats. And he would say things like, well, we got to send our Mormon off to go get our beers again. And, that
Because he knew you wouldn't bogart any of the supplies.
That's probably right, because he knew that when it got back, there's half an empty. Like all of them are half empties. People are just taking drinks as they come by.
It's funny.
He thought he got great comic relief watching. And look, frankly, while I have a great deal of experience carrying a lot of cups at once, I don't have a great deal of experience covering a lot of frothy beer cups at once. That hasn't happened for me.
It's a different challenge. Is he the person that said that he didn't realize that it was okay to hate Mormons? Is that?
Yeah. No, he's the one who that, you know, he was fairly agnostic himself. You know, his wife was very Catholic, and he was like, it's fine. And but you know, he got to the end of it and he said, yeah, I mean, I realized how okay it is to hate Mormons. That's what he said. So, you know, everyone I tell about your dissertation, everyone I'm like, oh, I have this Mormon student who's writing that, you know, he didn't have President Nelson's memo. So I have this Mormon student and he was talking about, you know, and he's like, it's crazy to me that all of them just react with vitriol. Like, I'll tell them how interesting it is, you know, the way the United States government persecuted Mormons. And they will say things like, well, that's different. The Mormons deserved it. But it's crazy. Like, so people have built their entire careers.
These are smart, academic,
whose entire careers revolve around, in the field of diplomatic and American history, their entire careers revolve around the fact that the United States is evil and the United States persecutes minorities.
Right.
And when those same people are like, oh, look what happened to Mormons, like, well, that's different. They deserve it.
That's crazy. And he was shocked by it, surprised.
He was totally stunned. He's like, the level of just casual antagonism towards Mormons, he was stunned by it.
Yeah, stunned, and then said, all right, now go pick up 13 beers and bring them back.
We need some more Pabst Blue Ribbons up here. No, I wasn't at Madison, so.
Yeah, well, that's fascinating. Well, Garrett, in the Phoebe Draper Palmer Brown mailbag, we have a couple of emails here from a couple of
our listeners joining us for the first time. We don't always talk about sports betting and how to carry beer to start.
Well, not always both of those things.
We always talk about one of those things, but we will get to some topics soon.
We will. Had the wonderful privilege of getting a root canal this week, serving in Oregon. This comes to us from Elder Major, by the way. On our way home, we had your podcast playing when I had to turn it off. Yes, your podcast is more painful than a root canal. Just kidding. I put that in there. I put that in there. Your podcast has helped strengthen my testimony and help me when I teach people the gospel. Thank you. Also, a fun coincidence is we were having dinner with our Elders Quorum president of our ward when he started talking about your podcast, when lo and behold, he is actually the Rex's Elders Quorum president. Also, that's very funny. Also, my dad bought the premium, so you guys sending me the podcast cancels it out. Keep up the good work. Now all I need is dinner with Bill the adulterer.
That is a great email.
That is very funny.
A missionary who's been paying attention.
So the missionaries came over to our house. They stopped by. We have this sweet and wonderful missionary, Elder Abel. He has served in our stake for 11 months.
Wow.
Yeah, he's from Mississippi. He's one of my favorite missionaries of all time. Big fan of his. And so he listens to the podcast, and he's a very funny, kind of sarcastic missionary. He's great. And so he was talking about how he was in a zone meeting or a leadership meeting for the mission, and he told how he just stole content from the podcast, made everyone think that it came straight from him, and everyone's like, wow, that is really...
So he just puts out profound things. So like, have you guys even thought about how the dates were changed to Doctrine and Covenants section?
No, it was so... I was so proud of him And it was so funny. I was laughing so hard. He was like, yeah, guys, I was just thinking, like this and this. They're like,
they're like, well, how do you know that? And they like quote the Joseph Smith sermon. Like, well, Joseph Smith said in 1842, like, how does Elder Abel know this?
If missionaries aren't using the podcast to rise to the highest levels of missionary leadership, then you are doing yourself an enormous disservice. That's the main purpose of this.
Yeah, we expect all missionaries who listen to us to use this as they aspire to mission leadership. That we need you to burnish your credentials. Maybe Elder Abel could do it better and get transferred after 11 months.
Well, he's here another transfer. He's gonna literally be in our stake for a year. But so the highest degree of missionary leadership is obviously MTC district leader.
Oh,
that is the highest.
Yeah. In fact, there are members of the 70 right now who wish that they were MTC district leaders and had the mail key.
Not Area 70. First
General Authority. No, first or second quorum. Yeah. They sit back in their office and they think, without the MTC mail key, I have no power.
So Riker, when he was there, did they still have a mail key? Is that still a thing?
They still do. And the district leader is tasked with going to the mailroom and getting the mail twice a day. They have to go twice a day.
That's no man taketh this honor unto himself, except possibly a district leader.
There are few actual callings in the church where when they give you keys, it's actually a key. Like that's what the MTC district leader gets. Right. Is here's your actual keys.
Anyway, that's great. When he was telling me that over the weekend, I'm like, Elder Abel, that's the funniest doggone. All right, this next email comes to us from somebody that I cut off their name. Oh, okay. Elder Jensen. This is Elder Jensen. Dr. Garrett Dirkmaat and Professor Richard Leduc. By the way, Elder Jensen asks a question, and I went ahead and cut that out. So, Elder Jensen, I'm sorry about that.
We'll answer your question sometime into the third 100 years of the millennium.
Very good question. Not going to get to it.
Yeah.
But it was very good. So thank you for the kind question. As someone who has listened to every episode at least once, but no more than twice, and hasn't emailed in yet, I wanted to let you all know. So now he did serve in Texas, so he conjugated the y'all together.
Yeah. Everyone knows you wear a cowboy hat now to BYU games, so they're wondering. Well, they think Oklahoma's got you.
Just for this, go Pokes, and by that I mean lose by 3. I wanted to let you all know how much I appreciate what you do. You too, yes, sometimes even Richard, have such an incredible and captivating way of explaining history and sharing testimony that I at first hated, then hated, still hated, tolerated, kind of liked, hated again, then as of now have come to love. Well, that's how everyone comes to the
it honestly sounds like the way Angie describes our courtship.
That's pretty good. By the way, I got a great idea from friend of the show Damien, because we put together 2 years ago kind of the missionary extravaganza. Hey, here are the 30 or so episodes. His idea was, and I don't know why I should just do like Elder Abel and just stole the idea and take full credit.
Yeah, why
for
are you giving Damien any credit at all?
I don't know, but it was a really good one. He's like, you should put together like
give Maley the credit. Say that she's the one who came up with it.
You had a fireside in their steak, right?
Yeah,
last week. It was very nice. So the idea is like, why don't you put together like, hey, you're getting started. You're introducing the podcast. These are the 40 episodes you listen to kind of ease in, kind of to Elder Jensen's point here, right? Like,
so that you can learn about who Bill the adulterer is.
Yeah. Well, so the inside jokes, but also like, the good stuff. I mean, anyone that ever wants to listen that hasn't listened, I always say, listen to the martyrdom episodes.
Yeah.
Those are the most
popular.
Listen
to Doctrine and Covenants section. We met with a friend today, in fact, who said, Doctrine and Covenants section 76 and 93, that those episodes were significant to him.
They were. And by the way, we have a label as friend of the show, right? And this Jarrett really is a friend of the show. He bought our lunch. I feel like that's
and
now
I feel
the
like
bar.
all these missionaries wanting some free content. Where's my? No one ever threw a party for me.
Yeah, and you've been the good one.
I've been the good
You've
guy.
been the good guy.
Hopefully, you know what movie we're quoting because we quote it to each other all the time.
All the time.
It's one of our favorite church movies of all time. Is The Prodigal Son, and the part where the older brother is just raging that they threw a party for the younger brother who was a drug addict and wasted all of his father's money.
So Garrett, I am going to play that. I'm going to play that clip here
now.
Yeah, I'm going to play that.
You don't want
clip
to hear
here.
me try to recreate it first and then see how the clip.
All right,
matches up.
No, you do it, and then I'll cut it, and then I'll put in the clip.
Okay, so I mean, I can't be exact because I haven't seen it in 20 years. I still remember. You know, he goes and he's having this argument with his wife afterwards because she wants to forgive him, and of course he doesn't. You know, he doesn't want to. You know, you want me to tell you how nice it is to see you, Tom. You know, so good to have you back, Tom. Great to have you. He's very. You know, you want me to start throwing parties for him? And then he goes over and he sits down at the piano and he slams his hands on the piano and he says, "Well, no one ever threw a party for me, and I've been the good guy. I've been the good guy."
And then his wife says.
She comes up to him and goes, "What does that mean? You've
been
the
good guy."
Oh, come on! You think you know there? You have to
admit.
You have to admit there's a big
difference
between what he's done and the things I might have done. And she said, in probably the most condescending way ever, the only difference I see is that one of you is trying to repent. One of you isn't. It is laden.
No exaggeration. We quote one of those parts to each other at least 2 or 3 times a month, at least.
I don't know why so much. On my mission, in fact, we quoted it so much that we had decided that the greatest ending would have actually been had he slammed the piano and said, "And I've been the good guy," and then leapt through the plate glass window that was right there as just a grand exit. That would have been a great ending.
Yeah. Anyway, all right, I'm going to play it here.
You want me to tell him how wonderful he is and forget about all the misery that he caused this family? You want me to start throwing parties for him? Well, no one ever threw a party for me, and I've been the good guy. I've been the good guy.
What does that mean, you've been the good guy? Do you mean because you haven't made the same mistakes as your brother that you're that much better than him?
Come on. You gotta admit there's a big difference between the things he's done wrong and the things I might have done.
The difference I see is that one of you is trying to repent and one of you isn't.
You nailed that. You really nailed it.
You're very kind. And you're still auditioning to be the co-host each week. So
back to the email. Even when I have other things to do, so much so that you could say I don't subscribe to the premium, not because I have not, but if I had, I would subscribe to the premium. Mosiah 4:24.
He's editing the Book of Mormon there. Very good at the missionary.
He's likening it to himself, Garrett. And no, I'm not going to selfishly take advantage of your love for missionaries like all other missionaries and their families by requesting access to the Google Drive. Thanks for offering, though. I sent it to you, Elder Jensen, by the way. So there's one way to get it is to say, you know what, I don't want it. Well, you're getting it. On a more serious note, I do not think it an exaggeration to say that y'all alone have been able to spur in me a love of church and its history that has led to a deep and abiding love of Joseph Smith, the prophet of the restoration, and the greatest man who has lived on earth except Jesus Christ. Ever since I have come home a year ago from serving proselyting in Southeast Texas and transferred to being a service missionary here in northern Utah and learning about the podcast in April from Follow Him, so many questions I had, as you can imagine, from serving in Texas have simply become non-issues, including plural marriage, So don't worry about questions regarding that from me. My faith and testimony have continued to grow, and your show has supported that growth in ways I am probably not even aware of. And then he goes on to ask his question, which we will ignore because it's good, but it's not in the flow of the direction that we want to head.
We have a flow right now. Yeah. There's about 40,000 people right now saying, what's the flow?
That's fair. So thank you. You two have changed the course of my mission and propel me forward during some of my particularly difficult trials. With great appreciation from a 6-month listener, writer of long emails, respecter of historians, and a disciple of Jesus Christ, Elder Jensen.
Awesome.
P.S. My favorite quote from the show is, "Yeah, God needs to do better." Professor Richard Leduc. I don't
blasphemy.
First of all, I don't remember saying that. I'm not saying that I didn't say it. I'm sure that I did, but I'm sure that I said it in a sarcastic way, as someone criticizing God from
you were trying to prop up a Calvinist worldview.
Yes, I'm sure that's what I was doing. Yeah. I'm sure that I said it tongue in cheek. I sure hope that I did.
Maybe it was about God needing to build a better Adam, one that doesn't fall and destroy the world.
I think that was it, right? Like, just make a better Adam without a mouth, or why have the tree, or why have a Satan? This last email that will lead into our discussion, then, Garrett, ridicule on our religion. Hello, Richard Leduc and Dirk Moss. I know it's Dirk Mott. You guys might remember me from our tour from last June, where I was name dropped on the podcast a few times. Recently, I've been listening to the podcast. His dad's a great guy. Both their whole family great, right? But him listening to the podcast, bit of an upset. I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah, all right.
It's very good. Where I was named, blah, blah, blah. I've been listening to the podcast and thought of a question. Why does our religion get joked and ridiculed everywhere you look? For example, of this, you would see South Park, the Book of Mormon play, and many other shows. And apparently the entire University of Colorado.
Not a surprise.
Not a surprise. I was wondering why our religion gets joked about more than Islam, for example, even though their religion was created from new doctrine. And the final part of my question, what is the history behind the ridicule of our religion? There might be an answer in your earlier podcast episodes, but I have not gotten to them yet. Sincerely, the teenager playing Clash of Clans. He was playing that as Garrett was describing the context of the entire tour. It was very good.
Yeah. So I'm like, and here the saints made a sacrifice, and he's like sending hog riders in. Yeah.
Great kid. And it's a very good question.
Yeah. Honestly, a good question that, there are lots of reasons. And look, there's a difference between, people who are good natured about, joking around about things they think are a joke, and people who are, foaming at the mouth in a John C. Bennett sort of way, trying to destroy the church. But it is true that Latter-day Saints are made fun of often. Look, there's a great deal of Islamophobia in the world. There's a great deal of anti-Semitism. There are other great religions that have been mocked, ridiculed, and made fun of by their detractors. So we certainly don't own a title to that. I mean, you don't have to listen to a evangelical Christian pastor for very long before you hear something about Catholics. And I hate to break it to you, it's never positive. They're never like, you know who really got it right? The Catholics. You don't hear that very often from a Protestant minister. But in the idea of joking around, I think it's because, look, it's a safe place to joke, right? In part because essentially everyone, as the Pew Research study demonstrated, has a negative view of Latter-day Saints. And so what are the safe things to joke about? The things that everyone has a negative view of, right? So, I can joke about how high the the fees are on a Ticketmaster ticket, because unless you work for them, if you've ever experienced it, like, oh yeah, I'll buy a ticket for $100 and it's $75 more for the fees on top of it, right? I mean, like, and so, we can all joke about taxes because we all hate them. We can joke about, how awful it is to go to the dentist because even, like this elder, right? Root canals are rough for everybody. So I think there's something about universality that lends to humor. And since you've already listened to the first, 20 minutes of the podcast, you're well aware we have no idea what humor is. But historically speaking, the things that people mock are the things that are universally placed in an other category because it's a safe thing to make fun of, right? I mean, I can make fun of Latter-day Saints because, frankly, I probably don't even think that there is another Latter-day Saint anywhere, right? So I don't even think about it in those terms. And it's kind of like what we talked about with, my professor's reaction at the University of Colorado. So some of that really does come out of contempt. I mean, it is true. I mean, if you were to say something like, it's hard to imagine people making a mockery of another religion the way that the Book of Mormon musical makes a mockery of ours. And yet at the same time, there would be a lot of Catholics who would say, oh, really, get in line. How many movies mock and make fun of the Catholic faith, right? And claim things about Catholics or place Catholic priests as being the evil person. I mean, the reality is, mockery is even at times when people feel like it's good natured, it sometimes hides that barb that's actually still there. But that's a good question. Obviously we know that there's opposition. And that, kind of leads into part of what we wanted to talk about. And that is that, we went to the 6 Days in August movie, Richard and I and our spouses. And Richard, what did you think of it?
I loved it. I loved it from the jump, Garrett. They had Cold Stone ice cream and waffle cones for everyone at the premiere. It was ridiculous that I was at the premiere. I think that everyone knows how ridiculous that is. But I did take full advantage of the Cold Stone ice cream, and that's the great way to kick things off. You want to buy my positive review, start with ice cream. That's the first thing. The actual movie I thought was great. There were many aspects to it that I really enjoyed. And one of the things that I especially liked, I think maybe even to the point you're making, is that I believe it was the writer and the director talked about, or maybe it was the producer, talked about how as Latter-day Saints, we need to take more control of telling our stories. And as we do that, then, if we leave it in the hands of somebody else, not of our faith or of no faith, then what can we expect? And I thought it was very well done.
Yeah. And that really is the sentiment. I mean, that sentiment is the sentiment that pushed Joseph Smith to, want a history of the church to be created. I mean, he tried multiple times. I mean, every time Joseph assigned someone to write a history, they then apostatized and then took the history with them. So it was a real problem. Like, so he had John Corrill write a history, and John Corrill apostatizes. He had John Whitmer write a history, and then John Whitmer apostatized. Maybe, you know what? Honestly, maybe it's just the name John. I think.
Yeah, there is a correlation.
Is there anyone listening named John who's not an apostate? We need you to email in because we have to test the hypothesis.
I think there's an aspect of this from President Nelson and the biography on Joseph Smith as well, right? I mean, there's an element of that where it's like not having all of these other things. The Joseph Smith papers is part of that.
Yeah. I mean, how does Joseph open the Joseph Smith history? Well, the history of Joseph Smith, which is the history of the church. Owing to the many reports which have been put in circulation, by evil disposed and designing persons in relation to the rise and progress of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, all of which have been designed by the authors thereof to militate against its character as a church and its progress in the world, I have been induced to write this history so as to disabuse the public mind and to put all inquirers after truth into possession of the facts as they have transpired, in relation both to myself and the church as far as I have such facts in possession. The beginning of the history of the church, where we wrote out a narrative. The opening paragraph is, why are you writing this? Writing this because you guys are all liars. I'm writing this because you've taken something that's sacred from God and you have demeaned it and mocked it and ridiculed it. And there are real world consequences for those lies. I mean, it's easy to say, well, what difference does it make if someone lies about it? Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, right up until there are people being murdered in Missouri. Right up until there are children clinging to their mother's skirts. They're being driven out of Nauvoo. Right up until people like Emmeline Anderson have her 14-year-old lifeless son brought home from the mob attack. The reality is that people who stir people up in anger, and we know from the scriptures that that's Satan who stirs up the children of men to anger, there are sometimes real world consequences that aren't just, oh, I hurt your feelings because I made fun of your temple garments or something like that, your temple clothes. And honestly, I mean, one of the great parts of that movie was they did a great job portraying Thomas Sharp. It was the Thomas Sharp I wanted, not the Thomas Sharp I needed.
No, it was good. He looked like the Undertaker from WWE fame.
Yeah, the actor did a great job, and they portrayed Wilford Woodruff exactly the way I want Wilford Woodruff portrayed.
Oh, yeah. He gets in a fist fight. It's great.
He's constant, and if you don't come out of that movie loving George A. Smith, then you'll never love George A. Smith.
That is true. Yeah, you love you some George A. Smith.
George A. Smith has this conversation with Thomas Sharp at the end, where he basically says to Thomas Sharp, you're going to be convicted at a court a lot higher than the one that just acquitted you, basically. So it was great, and it's great to tell our story. Obviously, like, people will be like, "Oh, how accurate was it?" Don't ever go watch a movie to determine, everything that you've ever known about history. We've already talked about on this podcast how you can't just go off of an image that you've seen. An artist paints an image of the second coming, and then for the rest of your life, you're like, no, I know the angels have to be holding the trumpets this way because that's the way they were in the painting. I mean, realize that this is a piece of art, and it can't be inclusive of everything. It literally can't be. And so, rather than going through and saying, well, I would have done this and I would have done that, frankly, go and enjoy it as something that Latter-day Saint men and women of faith put together as a means of defending what it is that we believe. While all the world is clamoring and climbing all over themselves to try to attack, mock, militate against the things we believe, these people put their money, their time, their talents where their mouths are, right? They said, I will go out and spend all of this time, money, and effort to defend the prophet Brigham Young, that he really does have the keys given to him by the prophet Joseph.
So one of the things that this wasn't related to the movie, and certainly we can't guarantee this would happen if you go to see the movie this weekend. I don't know exactly how schedules line up, but like Garrett said, it's really a story of Brigham Young, and not just Brigham Young, but how after the death of the prophet Joseph, that the keys of the restoration rest upon the apostles, and that is the way that the church is to be led moving forward. And in the theater was President Oaks and Elder Stevenson. And it was, I mean, that the point of the movie is that the restoration rests upon the apostles. And there were 2 apostles in that theater, and it was really quite the experience.
We did have someone ask about, what else happens with Sidney Rigdon, because as you might imagine, Sidney Rigdon factors quite prominently. They show the public meeting where Rigdon attempts to convert people to his view that he should be the guardian of the church, and then Brigham Young speaks, and the people there, they follow after Brigham Young. Well, that's not the end of Sidney Rigdon. So go watch the film 6 Days in August. Go support someone who's trying to help increase faith. And in that regard, to kind of carry that story on a little further, I mean, much further than the movie could. After this meeting, there's still a willingness to try to reconcile with Sidney Rigdon. I think one of the things that, of course, you can't get from the movie, because it's a movie and they've only got a few minutes to show everything. They're like, this is 1837, and it's like 10 seconds. I mean, you can't show everything in a movie. The apostles work really hard to try to reconcile with Sidney Rigdon. They try to say, come back over to us and accept this. And Sidney Rigdon he's unwilling to do it. And a few days after that meeting where the church votes for Brigham Young and the Quorum of the 12, Wilford Woodruff records in his journal a sermon that Brigham Young gives August 18th, 1844. This is how Wilford introduces it. He said, "On Sunday, I met a vast congregation of saints at the Grove to hear a discourse from President Young upon the present excitement that is through Nauvoo in consequence of unwise teachings by some that are trying to draw a party after them." This is a synopsis of the discourse. President Young arose and said, "I have many things to speak of. It was my mind in the first place that we should have suitable time to meditate upon all matters and weigh them, even every subject wherein we felt interested. When the question was asked of me if they could continue to baptize for the dead, I said I had no counsel to give on the subject at present, but should think it not best to attend to it at that time. I've learned some things I did not know when I came home. I discover a disposition in the sheep to scatter abroad now the shepherd is taken away. I do not say that it will never be right for this people to go from here or to scatter abroad, but let them wait until the time comes and until they get counsel to do so. The report has gone forth through the city that the 12 have a secret understanding with those men who are going away and taking companies with them, that they shall take all they can, and although the 12 will blow it up in public, yet privately they wish it to go on. But if it was the last words I had to say before going into the eternal world, I would swear by the Holy Trinity that it is utterly false, and not a word of truth is in it. There is no man that has any right to lead any one soul out of this city by the consent of the 12, except Lyman White and George Miller, who have the privilege of taking the Pine Company where they please, but not another soul has the consent of the 12 to go with them." Now, Brigham Young is not saying, as some would later accuse him of, that, no one's allowed, no one leaves the city of Nauvoo. What he's talking about is at this point, barely a couple, 2 months, 3 months removed from Joseph's murder, there are multiple people that are starting to claim things like, well, Joseph said that, we could move to Iowa, and actually the Quorum of the 12 wants you to go to Iowa. You should come to Iowa with me. Well, the Quorum of the 12 just said that you shouldn't. I know they're saying that, but in actuality, underneath, they actually hate it. And maybe you might find some familiarity in this. How many times does the church give direction on a topic only to have somebody claim some kind of inside information that in fact the church didn't really mean what the church said? It happens all the time, and to the detriment of the church. I can think, a couple of instances just in the past 4 years where the church has said something very clearly that was something that upset a lot of other people. And so what did those people do? Instead of saying, wow, maybe I'll change what my position is, they began to attack the messenger itself, saying, well, that's not really from the prophet. I actually called the church, and I have a friend who works over there, and he said that he talked to somebody and they said that, yeah, President Nelson didn't do that. Okay, that's not how the church gives its counsel, just so everyone's aware. The fact that you have a friend who happens to work in public affairs and they claim that they told you that someone said that someone didn't say something, and that's not how the church gives counsel. And so you see, at modern times, boy, we have not changed a whole lot. We desperately want to hear exactly what we already believe. That's what your natural man wants to hear. I want to hear that the belief I have, that the political position I have, that the social position I have, whatever, I want to hear not only that it was right, but it was even more right than I thought it was. It was ridiculously right. It was super right. And I was always right in being right. I was so right that I was right. And so when the church takes a position on something that you don't believe in, rather than have the hard conversation with ourselves, which is, who do I take counsel from? From a prophet of God? From an apostle of God? Or from the person I super respect on the internet? Or from what it is that my family's always said? Rather than having that hard conversation, many people decide to just skip the conversation altogether and claim that either the message was faulty, that the messenger is lying, that the message didn't really come from the church, or as that's not a very tenable position, by the way, right? Your first, reaction to finding out someone you love has died is, the shock and denial, right? No, are you sure he's dead, right? I mean, and people do the same thing. The denial that the church has really said or done something on a particular topic. But that doesn't work for very long. I mean, you got to really, really jump through a lot of, mental hoops to think that the church put a statement out that it didn't mean to put out, that it was wrong about, that it knows is erroneous, but doesn't change it. I mean, you got to be thinking of a church that I don't belong to, that it puts out statements from the church, realizes there's an error in them because just someone told someone something, and then doesn't correct that. That's not the case, right? And so the problem with that line of thinking is, guess where it goes next? If I can't say that the messenger was wrong, okay, well, if that really is coming from, a member of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, if that really is coming from the president of the church, well, then they must have been misled. They must have been deceived. You know what? These people probably got together and they told these lies, and that's why they said what they said. Just notice how you go further and further down the line of undercutting prophetic authority all the while telling yourself, no one believes in the church more than I do. I'm the biggest believer in the church. I'm the most adamant believer. I believe. Well, this is the same thing that's going on in Nauvoo. People like James Emmett have wanted to lead a group of people out of Nauvoo to get a head start on the journey out because they're worried about the fact the violence is getting so bad with the mobs. Well, apparently James Emmett and other people are saying things like, well, the Quorum of the 12, they want you to go right now. And when the people respond, well, the Quorum of the 12 is saying, don't do that. They're saying, I know they're saying that, but actually privately, you know what they told me? That they do want you to do it. You see how manipulative that is? Because what you're doing is you're using the reliance on prophetic utterance in order to undermine prophetic utterance. You're saying, oh, I know the church said that they have this position on immigration, but they don't really. Because I have a friend who talked to a mission president, who talked to a member of the presidency of the 70, and he said that that's not what they think. Okay, well, that's not how the church puts out its doctrine. It doesn't matter who you know and what special conversations you had. You might as well be someone claiming that you were with a prophet who had an apocalyptic vision of the end of the world, but that no one ever heard except for you. The church's doctrine is taught clearly, repeatedly, and from proper channels. And when it happens to disagree with what we believe personally, it's time to take stock on why we believe what we believe personally. Not time to say, you know what? Let me show the church how they're wrong about this. Because this isn't a social club. Okay, this is not a political party that we decided to form. This is not a social gathering where we're all going to vote on who's supposed to be the prom queen here. This is the kingdom of God on earth. It's not about what Brigham Young wants to do. It's about what God commands him to do. It's not about what would be easier for beliefs and for the church to do. It's about what it is that God wants the kingdom of God on earth to do. And so as Brigham continues with his sermon, now he talks about Lyman White and George Miller. So they were part of the Pinery Company. So they were up cutting lumber for both the Nauvoo house and the Nauvoo temple. And they had written Joseph Smith and asked if they could move and create a colony in Texas. And Joseph Smith gave them permission that they could. And so Brigham Young is honoring that. Because again, anything that Joseph says, Brigham Young is going to say, absolutely. Joseph said it, that's what we're doing. But he's putting some strictures on that. Yeah, Lyman White, you can go create a colony in Texas, which is the Republic of Texas back then. But Joseph didn't say, and you can go get a whole bunch of people to follow you down there. He said you could take the people from the Pineries and go down to Texas. So if you're going to follow Joseph, you're going to actually follow Joseph, not follow Joseph plus also this too. Because what Brigham is teaching is that people need to put all of their efforts, all of their time, and all of their money into finishing the temple, into completing the Nauvoo temple. And people who are looking to leave to save themselves from mob violence or to get out of Dodge before the hammer falls from the government of Illinois, they aren't helping build the temple. They are undermining the effort to build the temple, even if they don't mean to do that. Brigham goes on to say, there is no man who has at any liberty to lead people into the wilderness from this church or to lead them anywhere else by the consent of the 12 or the church, except the case above named. And I tell you in the name of Jesus Christ that if Lyman White and George Miller take a course contrary to our counsel and will not act in consent with us, they will be damned and they will go to destruction. If men will not stop striving to be great and exalted and lead parties away from us and strive to weaken our hands, they will fall and not rise again. and I will destroy their influence in this church with the help of God and my brethren. I wish you to distinctly understand that the Council of the 12 is for every family that does not belong to the Pine Company to stay here in Nauvoo and build up the temple and get your endowment. Don't scatter. United we stand. Divided we fall. It has been whispered about that all that go into the wilderness with White and Miller will get their endowment. But they cannot give an endowment in the wilderness if we do not carry out the plan Joseph has laid and the pattern he has given for us. We cannot get any further endowment. I want it to sink deep into your heart that you remember it. I repeat it. Let me reason with you. If you stir up the flame of dissent, will you get an endowment? No. You get a party to run here and another there, and divide our strength and weaken our hands, and we will be left, and our enemies will flock around us and destroy us. In that case, you will not get your endowment, but you will sink and not rise, and go to hell, and not to the bosom of Abraham. Do the people leave here because they're afraid? Are you cowards? Do you fear those who have the power to kill the body? If you leave this place for fear of the mob before God tells you to go, you will have no place of rest. But you will flee from place to place and go like the Jews until God raises up some other people to redeem you. For if the devil scares you from this place, he will scare you from all other places. Let no man go from this place but the Pine Country brethren, and but stay here. Sow, plant, build, put your plowshares into the prairies. One plowshare will do more to drive off the mob than 2 guns. Let us stay here, where the bones of Joseph and Hiram, Samuel, Don Carlos, and Father Smith are. Joseph has said that if I'm slain in battle or if I fall in any way, I want my body to be laid in Nauvoo. And I'd rather have the dead body of the prophet than some men who are alive. Brigham he's a passionate man. And I should rather have the clothes of the prophet stuffed with straw for president of the United States than any man whose name is now before the nation as a candidate. That's probably not what someone wanted to hear if they were a political partisan.
Well, I received my my mail-in ballot here in Utah just today, and I actually voted for a Joseph Smith suit stuffed with straw. So I feel that that's exactly
Very
right.
Good. You kept it exactly the same way. We want to build the temple. So look, what he's talking about is people are terrified now that Joseph's dead. The mob is clearly willing to murder people, and the law is clearly unwilling to do anything about people that get murdered. So there are people who just want to get out of Dodge. I don't want to be here. What if I get murdered? And Brigham gives us this phrase that you've probably heard before. He says, we want to build the temple in this place. If we have to build it as the Jews built the walls of the temple in Jerusalem with a sword in one hand and a trowel in the other. How easily some men are scared. I have not been frightened yet, and I know of other men who have not. Do you suppose the mouth of God is closed to be opened no more unto us? If this was the case, I would not give the ashes of rye straw for the salvation of the church. It's one of Brigham's favorite lines when he's trying to say, I couldn't care less, right? If God's mouth is closed, then what difference does it make if the church survives? He's kind of making a point. Like, look, hey, if continuing revelation and authority ended with Joseph, then it doesn't really matter whether or not the church survives. The church is meaningless without a prophet and without authority. So, okay, hey, we have some pews and we've got some nice sacrament cups, but what difference does it make if you don't have the endowment? Part of what Brigham is trying to demonstrate here is the temple and the endowment is more important than your property. It's more important than you saving your lives. It's more important than getting out before the mobs come. It's more important than anything. And that focus on the temple and on the endowment is something that all of the groups that will break away, they will lose that connection. So we will talk more about what happens in the aftermath. I want to share a little bit of Sidney Rigdon's teachings and comments in the aftermath of the meeting there, but we'll have to save that for another episode. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for listening to the Standard of Truth podcast, hosted by historian Dr. Garrett Dirkmaat. If you know anybody that could benefit from the material in this episode, please share it with them. And for more resources, visit standardoftruth.com. Until next time.